Welcome back to the Set Chat Pack Crack video series. We are completely done opening up booster packs. Today we have something a little bit different. Again, I'm joined by Dan Winterhalter, Johannes Klarhauser, and Tom Target with pictures from Josh Fry. And since we've gone through all the booster packs, now it's time to talk about the fixed or promotional cards, the boutique sets, basically the cards that you won't find in the 17 booster packs. I've got the experts here again, collector and player experts, to talk about these boutique cards. Dan, can you start us off by talking about what these cards are all about?
So I tend to think of these cards as the cellophane collection. It is all of the packs that were put out by Decipher in cellophane, and they had fixed contents, and were in a clear cellophane because it was never randomized. So these were put out for a variety of different reasons. Some of them were to try and fix flaws in the original issue of the game. Some of them were promos to try and get you to buy books or other items that they had created, or that they were cross-promoting with. You'll get into that one later. And some of them were actually just an attempt to introduce people to the game in a simplified way, or in a way that might actually make them enjoy it more early on.
Great. Well, I think Tom is going to get us started with his strategy guide over there. Tom, you want to take it away?
So this is the first cellophane card I'd seen. So this is drawn from the strategy guide that was released, and in the back was a coupon for data laughing. So this is this card that could be sent away for, came in a small cellophane wrap, and obviously there's only one card in this particular issue. But that was the first one, Dan's got it there, that I'd ever seen come in that format. So it was nice to see. It's also a black border card. We're looking at here a transition from the early white border Premier sets in the alpha and beta, and also then into, there's some white borders coming up in the early releases as well. But data laughing, if you look at his text, it refers to some very specific dilemmas, I think from to AU or Q around there, and it also interacts with Rogue Borg mercenaries from the Premier set. So very much a card which is tailored specifically to conditions they must have felt they had to address at the time.
And data laughing is still fairly easy to find these days, both in and out of the cellophane. A lot of folks, he wasn't quite good enough to play a lot of the time, so people would leave him in the package. So you'll actually find a lot of these where the cellophane's been folded back so they can slip it in their 9-card pages with the rest of their set.
Yeah, market value wise, you're looking at roughly equivalent to sort of medium Deep Space Nine level rare. You know, more than a couple of white border premieres, but nothing too extreme.
Yep. The next promo set that came out was the Warp Pack. These were given out these were intended to be given out in your local game store when you bought more than X number of packs or starter decks. I believe the number was if you spent more than $20 in a transaction, you were supposed to get one. How many stores actually followed those rules? I have no idea. I know that this is the first cellophane pack I ever got in person. I got one of these, and my brother did also, and I know we spent very little at that time. In 1996, when we were still buying white border Premier and super excited about it. As a collector, it comes with a fixed rules packet, and it comes with either the Gorda on the front or the cards flipped backwards. So some people will collect both. It's a set of, I believe it's 12 cards, 12 white border cards. This is the origin of the Montgomery Scott white border promo card. He's definitely the most exciting of those cards. The majority of the rest of these cards are missions, and most of them showed up in alternate universe or in one of the future expansion sets. It was hopefully to make sure you had enough missions for the right faction to be able to actually play with very few cards, maybe even that $20 or $25 worth of cards.
Cost-wise, these used to be as cheap as you can imagine. Now they're up around that sort of same mark as the Data Laughing or a mid-cost DS9 level rare. Still fairly available, but certainly rising. You know, they used to be as cheap as they could be on eBay, but now they're creeping up in value.
Johannes, did you ever see any of these hit play or have any impact on play?
The data laughing card I never saw in play. It's a very specific card that calls out, as I said, a couple of very specific things. They might have been a problem. I personally have never heard about these cards that data laughing counters as actually being a problem, because Rogue Borg mercenaries tended to be played differently, not for the take over a ship function, but rather just to stop a ship. I think it was more about the iconic image where you have data completely out of character and just a very joyful picture. I think that was really a nice promo to get people's attention. And as for the war pack, the big thing there is, to me, the neutral outpost, because as we mentioned, the Decipher starter decks were really just a mess. They weren't actually starter decks. They were just a random stack of cards, and you might end up without an outpost, for example. So the neutral outpost fixes that. And also it gives you the yellow alert so that you can counter a red alert, that your friend who also opened the starter deck and happened to luck into a red alert, that you are on at least on equal footing when it comes to that. So I think if you pair it with the regular starter decks, then it helps to fix some of the issues. By far, not all of them, but it fixes some of the glaring issues when playing with only starter decks.
Moving into the introductory two-player game, I think this was right after Alternate Universe, they issued a white border two-player game box in both Federation and Klingon. The boxes were somewhat affordable. They weren't super expensive. I don't remember what they initially retailed at, but it wasn't terrible. And they came with, both the Federation and the Klingon came with a pre-constructed Federation and Klingon deck that was the same. And depending on which box you bought, you got a cellophane pack of specific cards for that affiliation, either Moog and a couple of his interesting family members in Klingon, or mostly the Barash Illusion Federation characters, Admiral Picard, Commander Troy, Commander Data. Both of these are actually very accessible now, but both of these sets of cards were roughly the power of some of the rares. So they were actually decent, and they were unique because they were the Barash Illusion versions of things. So it's kind of one of our toe dips into the future of certain characters.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I always saw Moog as the attempt to be a sort of Klingon Picard. We talked about Jean-Luc Picard being overpowered in the premiere. Moog is certainly comparable to him in terms of numbers of skills and pretty decent statistics. I liked the Gerard card, which is in there as well. It's a specific example of pairing with Toral with the leadership of 1/2. And it also gives him the extra boost of all attributes +5, and with Toral, which is something I hadn't seen before at that point. So those were kind of fun. It's a mixture, as you say, of some white border and some black border. So those two specific inserts contain the 4 or 3 or 4 black border cards. There's also the white border Spock, which I believe was a limited number, didn't come in every single box.
It came in every single Federation pre-constructed deck. So it actually was in both the Klingon and the Federation box because it was in the Federation deck. Gotcha. And it's white border. There's also, from a collector's perspective, a annoying set of, I believe it's 8 or 9 cards that are issued in white border in this set only, that are basically reprints of Alternate Universe cards, but they're in white border instead of black border. So as you're sorting your white border 95, you come across this extra mission or two, this extra couple of dilemmas primarily that are white border, but they are otherwise, they're only found in this set in white border. So
yeah, an example being Alien Labyrinth for a dilemma, or the IKC Karatak as a white border ship. You can still pick up the sealed actual boxes as well as the inserts. The Klingon ones are typically cheaper and easier to get in terms of sealed boxes than the Federation box, but the sealed inserts by themselves are about the same price. Spock as a white border card, even though he came quite frequently with many of these, still has, again, in that sort of mid-tier DS9 rare type value. He'll usually sell relatively fast. And when it comes to the white border promos and some of the missions which were included here, those often sell best as little mini sets. So someone will find out that there were these white border promos from this set and want to buy just those 7 or 8 cards specifically like that. So there still is some interest in this, but it can still be picked up in its sealed form relatively easily. It also includes the Data Laughing card, I believe, that we just talked about.
Yes, this was the first of a couple of places where Data Laughing was included in a purchasable set instead of as a mail-in. One more odd note, the Federation deck in this set, both the Klingon and Federation box, has a unique printing of the Menden common that is a transition between the white border 94 and 95 error correction. It is game-wise identical, all 3 are, but the text in the lore box shifts again in this particular Menden.
Any of these cards see play, Johannes? I mean, Tom mentioned the Moog being pretty powerful. The Spock also seems pretty powerful. Do you see these in play at all?
Yes, actually, especially the Federation alternate universe or the Barash illusion cards, they see a fair amount of play even today, mostly because later on in the holodeck adventure set, there's the holodeck door, which allows you to download holographic recreations or personal with the Barash icon. And that's a very cheap way of downloading specific personal into play. Not that they are super good personal. Admiral Picard, Commander Data, and Commander Troy, they all have sometimes better versions, but still they are additional versions. You can have these in play in addition to a different variety of Picard, if you will, and you can play them for free because the doorway that downloads them plays for free. So these see a lot more play than their Klingon counterparts. I've never seen Geral and Jarod in a deck myself. They might have been played at the time. Probably the colony ability was quite useful. Moog, I have seen quite a bit, but the Federation guys have the advantage that you can simply download them. The cards I see most actually are 2 missions, specifically Reported Activity and Distress Mission, because if you look at them, they have Honor ×3 on Distress Mission and Honor ×2 on Reported Activity. So these cards really lend themselves well to a Klingon deck focused around Honor mission specialists, because then you can easily go up to 50 points for 1 planet mission. And then with the other one, you always have a fallback that can give you almost as many points. So these 2 missions see, in my experience, significantly more play than all the other cards in the set.
I think it'd also be remiss not to mention Admiral McCoy. He has one of those skills that you only find on this particular card, which is cantankerousness. And that has direct reference with the AU set. In AU, there is a mission called Reunion, which can be solved individually or collectively for more points with the 3 original series characters who appeared in TNG. So Spock, McCoy, and Scotty, with his Miracle Worker ability, can all contribute towards that mission. I also see he has a strength of 1, which is very rare to have 1 listed in the boxes there at the bottom. Even some of the most duplicitous characters in the show will have an integrity of 2 instead of just 1. So I thought it was nice to see Admiral McCoy at his advanced age in this card.
One thing that I found strange, while I've never had these introductory 2-player game starters, is that it's only limited to 2 varieties, which I found a bit of a missed opportunity. The Premier starters, as we said, were very unfortunate in that they didn't guarantee cards that you could actually play the game with. Then you had the DS9 and Voyager starters that gave you semi-randomized stacks of cards, which in the end, it plays pretty much the same, but you have this element of surprise. And then you have those entirely fixed starters, which can be, they can be nice, especially if they are nicely balanced, but I always felt that 2nd edition did it a lot better in that they had 4 starters from the get-go, and that gives you a lot more variety when you play them against each other, even though the card lists are always the same. You get some extra rares, but with 4 different decks, there's a lot more to do than just always playing that against that or the mirror match.
Agreed. It would have been great to see Romulan. It would have been a great thing to see this concept come back with DS9 and throw a Bajoran Cardassian set out there. That would have been amazing, and it would have really driven, well, it would have driven Decipher to playtest their Bajorans and their Romulans sufficiently, and their Cardassians sufficiently to finally make them fully playable, awesome factions, or at least close to balanced.
If I had to speculate, I mean, the Romulans are probably the least played of the original 3 factions. Most people are going to play Federation, or you'd play Klingon typically. So I can see market-wise why it makes sense to focus on just these 2, but I agree, it's a complete missed opportunity, especially to bring some balance back in. I know we saw cards like Sorol in the expansions trying to sort of balance out those factions, but a good set of additional Romulans here could have made a huge difference.
I totally agree, Tom. I remember opening up that Sorol in our Q pack was so exciting to me because my brother played Romulan and I played Federation, and there just weren't that many Romulans. And I did have a few packs of Q, and I specifically remember trying to get that Terex and that Sorol for his deck. So I agree, Johannes, everyone here, having that Romulan 2-player would have been really helpful for my brother and I to get more excited.
Well, also, here we have, because we have the Barash Illusion counterparts of known personnel, you could have done the same with Tomalak from the same episode. He was actually kind of he should have almost been, he or Sela should have been the Picard equivalent, and they only gave him a couple of skills, if I recall. So that would have been a great chance to have a parallel there. You could have had other random Romulan personnel and really fleshed it out.
Yep. They did give him a card.
He comes back later, I believe. There's a second Tomalak, I think, in the premiere.
I think he's actually in AU or Q. I can't remember which, though.
I believe it's AU, Commander Tomalak, as opposed to Tomalak from Premiere. All right, how about First Anthology? What's that all about?
First Anthology was the first deck box expansion. So they actually came in these nifty boxes that were 600 or 800 count boxes. It came with packs, and it came with again a cellophane pack of 6 promo cards. As a collector, it is possible to find all 6 of the promo cards on the front of this. They are significantly rarer and more expensive than many of these other packs in the wild, especially sealed. So this is one of the few I can't just fan them out for you on. This was a lot of fun because this was our first preview to the fact that Decipher was going to go beyond those initial 3 or 4 factions. It was very exciting to see the different factions that they were playing with, and dual affiliation personnel and new artifacts and new property values. This is our first DS9 card in the Orb of Prophecy and Change. So it was a lot of fun to look through.
Yeah, so with both first and, as we'll talk about later, second anthology, they're kind of strange mirrors of each other in terms of value. So both have doubled in price over the last couple of years. But here's the difference. With first anthology, almost all the value is in that little insert which Dan just showed you. The cards, the sealed packs that come in there, you get like 2 starter decks, you get 2 AU packs, and you get 2 Q packs, and those are all relatively cheap and easy to acquire. With a second anthology, it's the other way around. The 6-card insert is remarkably cheap, can be picked up for just a couple of dollars, as opposed to the fact that it comes with 2 First Contact packs, 2 DS9 packs, and 2 Dominion packs. So there's roughly equal value in these 2 sets, but the source of that value is kind of flipped around. As Dan mentioned, it's really fun to see cards here that we don't actually see come out in sets till almost right at the end. For some of them, it's great to see some faction symbols. I know we'd seen Ferengi before, but here we have Quark, son of Keldar, with a Ferengi icon, as well as his Klingon affiliation. So when it comes to the rareness of this, I think most people are happy to have one of the front-facing cards, as Dan just told up. Mine's the Thomas Paris one. I see you have the Orb of Prophecy of Change one. But this is one of the harder core things to obtain if you want the complete set of 6 inserts with the different cards on each front. So if you do find a set of these cards sealed, it's from the pure market standpoint, you could easily sell that and buy back the 6 cards separately individually and still make a profit. So you can buy these cards. Yeah, so you can buy these cards opened for much cheaper than sealed, because that sealed pack is really where the value is for this set.
Yeah, I find it amazing how much of a preview this actually is. Not just the affiliations, it's, as you said, the property logos that shows, hey, we actually will do something with Voyager, with Deep Space Nine, and especially the Ensign Tuvok is more or less a preview of what they're doing with the motion pictures right at the end. It already includes the era icon.
Right.
So that's probably something that people found exciting. I don't know. It's something I only realized looking back at these cards, that this was actually present right then. When they actually had fleshed out plans at that point, I can only speculate, but I found it interesting how much we've already seen there.
Any of these cards played now?
Probably the one card that you will find most out of these is Dr. Telek Remor. Not necessarily because he's so good on his own, but rather because later on we had Temporal Micro Wormhole, which specifically allows you to download him and then lets him mix with any of your affiliations. And his skill set of Science, Stellar, Engineer, Astro ×2, also Honor, and the very good attributes across the board, is especially handy for space missions. So several decks will just seed or play a Temporal Micro Wormhole, have this card in the queue's tent, and get him out if they need his skills. If they don't, they can also use the alternative download of a space-time portal. So he's definitely the most playable of these cards.
I think they're also trying to get your attention because each of the personnel has one of those, as opposed to just a regular set of skills. They also have a very specific Telecromors, may report directly anywhere. Tom Paris's, you can choose between treachery or honor conversion. Quark's, all attributes +3 for the Grilka. And then Ensign Tuvok's once per game may cancel ship battle at the same nebula, and Garak's ability to select random personnel. So whenever I see these type of bits of text, I'm assuming they're trying to make the card have a greater appeal by giving it some sort of game mechanic, which is slightly outside of the normal skills and attributes.
Which actually later on became almost the norm in second edition, where you had very bland cards that are simply just attributes and skills. But most of the unique cards actually have additional game text. And when they merged the lore box and the game text box, they gave them a lot of flexibility to also put more complex mechanics in those special skills.
And in what could be one of the greatest segues of all time, also included in the first anthology box was a coupon for the Fajo collection. That will actually still sell loosely by itself. It has enough interest because many people use that coupon after opening the box. So as people might not have had it, they will often buy it separately.
Yeah. So the coupon itself you can find, and collectors want to have at least one copy of. And then honestly, a lot of people's favorite expansions, or at least mine, is the Fajo collection. And if you remember Decipher's tagline, it is the art of great games. And this set is them saying, okay, we're going to do the art of the game and play with all of these fun concepts. And so it was only released in a fixed set. And it was not cheap. And so I didn't acquire mine until many years later. But it has a variety of things included, including the bubblegum to go with Roger Maris's baseball card. It has Dixon Hill's business card. It came with a poster. It's got a variety of absolutely gorgeous, wonderful cards. And these cards even bridge the border. They break the mold of what the cards look like. And that's part of the fun of all of it. Forgive the glare.
You've got to say it right. It's bubble gum.
Yeah, I will admit that I have never eaten any of the bubble gum, but I do still have 5 or 6 of them in my doubles hiding over there. Should someone want to trade for one?
I'm actually tempted to go and buy one just to eat the gum. I've never eaten the gum. I feel there should be yeah. I'll risk it. We'll see.
At this point, 25-year-old gum scares the Jesus out of me. But this comes with so many fantastic cards. And as a collector, it's a ton of fun because it's kind of like they pulled the fun gravy cards out of 4 or 5 expansion sets. This is what would have made Q Continuum a lot of fun to open. If they put half these cards in there, it would have been a whole different experience. And it brings up so many different characters and different new things. They've got an interrupt written entirely in Klingon. They've got the first dual personnel card in the Sisters of Duras.
First tri-personnel card in Tolera.
They had the first 3 affiliation card in Tolera. They had Miles O'Brien, his first card, and it doesn't actually show him particularly well because it's through the transporter distortion from the episode Barclay's transporting several times and afraid of it. And it has DNA Metamorphosis, which glows in the dark. So tons and tons of fun cards and fun Easter eggs in amongst those cards.
I agree. I mean, there's each, when I look through DNA Metamorphosis, for example, there's also the glows in the dark and the non-glows in the dark version, which can often come about in collectors' circles.
Right. And to be fair, Decipher never intended to release the non-glow in the dark version. As best we can understand, that's from when Decipher went under and sold their uncut sheets to Hills and I believe it was primarily to Hills, and Hills cut some of their uncut sheets, even though those sheets hadn't been through the final printing process to put the glow in the dark ink on them. So you may still be able to access those through buying the sets of cards at Hills.
I absolutely love the distortion effect on the black hole card, simulating that curvature in space-time and the distortion of the path of light. We have the interrupt/event class for the Dixon. First of all, Dixon Hill business card, amazing card, but to actually have a new classification introduced there. We have several cards where part of what is in the image spills outside of the border. So we have Locutus's red laser beam, we have Guinan's iconic hat, we have Spot's paws, and we also have the wonderful USS Pasteur, IKS Chang double, where you see the disruptor beam traveling from the Chang into there. Also with the Q artifact, Picard's artificial heart, it's sort of a Photoshop job as well. So I know we see several of those throughout different sets, but yeah, I agree. Just each one of these is fun in its own right. They each have quirks. They have new symbols, new icons, new strange things. It's just a really fun set to look at.
So a lot of collector kind of centered kind of excitement, more kind of an experience, it seems, than maybe just collecting these cards. Does that translate to playability, Johannes? Was this an exciting set for players?
I looked at the list. So far, I've used 12 of those cards actively. I haven't found a use for the Roger Maris card, Persistence of Memory. DNA Metamorphosis just never makes the cut, power-wise. Kapla, I've yet to use. Dixon Hill's business card, and what was the other one? And Picard's artificial heart. All the others are playable. Some of them very much so. I think the ones you see most are lore, because later on with Defend Homeworld, you could download him thanks to his security, and then just look at his skill list and the attributes. He's good in his own right, and then he also has the effect of doubling the crystalline entity, specifically, not necessarily the rogue Borg, but the crystalline entity is a special ability that is used quite a bit. So he's very good. Tolera, also I've seen a lot in non-Federation decks. Dr. Sung is very good, especially once the cybernetics expertise incident came out, a card that is still occasionally used was used in a World Championship winning deck, I think 8 years ago, if I remember correctly. Locutus of Borg is a staple in many Borg decks that try to assimilate Earth. Guinan has seen a resurgence in the virtual era because there are now more powerful or more alternate universe icon dilemmas that can be very dangerous. So people have taken her back out of the binders to counter these cards. So there are a lot of cards that can have a gameplay impact. I've also seen the Pasteur and the Chang used in specific decks. So yeah, apart from being very gorgeous cards, they are also quite powerful. And I even found a use for Spot in a deck recently.
It is criminal that they only gave Spot Cunning of 2. Like, that is a ludicrous underrepresentation of that animal's attributes. Sort of value-wise, I mean, these cards do sell individually. Occasionally I've picked up boxes and there's been a few of these sprinkled in, and people do buy these cards individually. But as Dan said, the cost at the time was very high. But as Decipher often did at the beginning, their print run was much, much larger than the demand for those cards, especially at that price. So you can still pick these up sealed in almost perfect condition for a relatively low cost. So it's definitely something. It's almost, if I throw in an order at Hills, sometimes I just throw one of these in for fun, just because I can. And I'm glad they became more available than they were at the time.
So shortly after they released Fajo Collection, they also released the first of the oversized promo cards. And these cards are noticeably larger and non-playable. This one was in Inquest magazine, trying to promote the Fajo Collection and the CCG in general. This one is still reasonably findable. Some of the other ones are less so, and we'll talk about them later on.
You mentioned Inquest magazine, Dan, and we're segueing into the away team pack. Was that also something you could find in a magazine?
I believe you could find that in Scry or in Inquest as well. I think Scry. This is a 2-card pack, and they always were back to back, so you could see both faces, which was wonderful. From a collector perspective, it was super exciting to see our first Bajoran, to see the Traveler. He does a lot of fun things. But this pack was also in reference to 2 of Decipher's ambassadors that were out there promoting the game. And these were the names that they went by when they were on internet boards and when they would introduce themselves. So they were the Emissary and the Traveler. So you'll also find a lot of the Traveler signed by Kyle and a few of the Emissary signed, and I've forgotten that gentleman's name.
Avery Brooks.
No, the Decipher ambassador.
Oh, the ambassador.
Yep. So if you're looking at autographed cards, particularly these 2, make sure you're buying the actor or the Decipher ambassador. You may get duped into the other. Well, you may get duped into the ambassador if you weren't paying attention. Particularly the Traveler, Eric Menyuk has not signed nearly as many cards as Kyle has.
It's interesting you asked that question, Tom, because I'm just sitting here thinking, oh, we're Avery Brooks and the actor who played the Traveler signing up with Decipher to promote the game, which would have been such an interesting coincidence and amazing opportunity, right, for both sides there.
Well, the permutation and combinations, as Dan said, you might have one of the ambassadors signing both cards. You might have them signing separately. People might use them for the actor signatures. So there's all the different ways these can be signed.
What's it, IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations?
Yes.
The thing.
Do you see these in decks, Johannes?
I don't think I've actually seen them in a deck myself. I know that the Emissary's ability in theory is very good because you can use him as a moving outpost and have your Bajorans report where he is present. The problem is that you don't normally get him out easily, so there's no extremely easy way to set this up. It's nice to have in game, but it's not usually something that I see decks built around. What I like about him is that he has the Federation and Bajoran affiliation icons. There's a VIP. So he's one of the go-to cards that people use when they try to do the diplomatic conference mission. That is worth 60 points, but you need VIPs from 4 different affiliations in total. What Decipher hid in one of their glossary entries is that the mission itself gives you permission to have your guys mix there. So you just need to get them there from different outposts. And nowadays you can actually do this with only Federation guys. You have enough dual Federation and something else VIPs that you can just play strict Federation, beam them down to the planet, and then switch all these guys like Koval to Romulan mode, the Emissary to Bajoran mode, and then get your 4 affiliations despite playing only Federation, as it were. So that's the kind of deck where I see him, but I've never actually played against such a deck myself. Now, the Traveler is a card that appears on fewer lists still, but I think most people try to use him, when they try to use him, either to score easy Cytherians points or as a sneaky way to attack their opponent, because it allows you to relocate your ship to anywhere on that space line, not to a different space line, but if your opponent thinks they are safe because there are 8 missions in between their ship and your fleet, suddenly they can have a ship at their doorstep just with this one card there. But again, not something that I've personally seen used actively.
You can still pick up these packs, again, relatively inexpensive, but much like a lot of these, we're starting to see a slight level of scarcity changing the prices at this current time.
Official tournament sealed deck. That seems pretty player centered.
As a collector, real quick, it's another cellophane pack. It comes in our pretty sealed box, and this is one of the ones as a collector. It comes with 6 deck boxes. Each one of these had one of the 6 original affiliations: Federation, Klingon, Romulan, Borg, Cardassian, and Bajoran. And so there was a lot of horse trading and trying to get them all, and trying to get the one for that one deck that you always play, but you could never quite seem to draw the right card for, or draw the right box for. The cards themselves are fun. They're dilemma heavy and mission heavy. And let's pass this over.
Well, let me stop you right there, Dan, about the boxes for a moment, because there's a lot of chatter on the Facebook group about these boxes. So I guess 2 questions just to clarify. You can't tell which affiliation you're going to get from the outside. Is that right?
Correct.
And was there an even distribution as far as folks know about each individual one? Or okay, so one, like the Federation deck box, isn't particularly rare as far as we know in the others.
No, the Federation and Klingon deck boxes are the ones I hear people begging for most. And my guess is just that that's because they were used most commonly because people had Federation or Klingon decks and beaten the crap out of most commonly. So finding one in good shape now is harder.
This is the main issue. Yeah, like finding a pristine box is much more difficult because these did see, even if not play, they saw storage and storage within boxes and multiple openings and closings. So really you're looking to buy the pack sealed, but then you're taking that 1 in 6 chance of getting maybe if you just want the one faction.
And even when you buy a case, you were not guaranteed an even distribution inside that case.
It wouldn't be Decipher if there wasn't an uneven distribution to contend with.
Yeah.
How many came in a case?
12, I believe.
12, yeah.
And the other piece of this is the top is fairly well constructed. The bottom is ridiculously fragile. It did not survive. The tops would survive, though they would scrape up pretty quick. The bottoms wouldn't survive much of anything. So it was pretty frequent that you would actually see tops of boxes of other affiliations because they'd already stolen the bottom and worn through that too.
Is this the only promotional and or just Decipher CCG product where people are actively opening up packaging to find something that's not a card?
I know at least a half dozen collectors and players that pretty much only store their cards in first and second anthology boxes. So there's definitely a market for empty boxes of the card storage that Decipher put out. Is there a huge market for it? No, but it definitely exists. And if you put one up on eBay, it will get bought as long as you don't price yourself out of the market.
That's right. I'm your marketeer for empty OTSD boxes because I always like to do my custom box tops and give them out as prize support. So this is in a couple of weeks' time, one of the deck boxes that the winner gets. And I find them even today just the right size for a rather straightforward deck. So I'm not sure you can see it here. So this is a rather standard deck that has a Q's tent with 13 cards, 30 seed cards, 6 missions, and then it's still, depending on what paper you use to print your cards, as I do, still gives you room enough for 60, 65, 70 deck cards. And that's for decks that you want to keep assembled. I find this still a very good size. And that's actually still the kind of box that I take with me when I travel. So when I do my custom box tops, I tend to put a layer of adhesive tape on it. So that's why you probably have some glare there. But I've had some of these boxes for more than 15 years now, and they still hold. So I'm quite happy with these. And also the product that was in it was, I think, one of the best things that Decipher ever put out, because here you have basically the contents of a starter deck, of a Premier starter deck. You have 4 boosters and 1 alternate universe booster, but they give you a set of fixed cards that make sure that is playable. And you have everything that you need. You have an outpost there. You have a personnel with medical and security and a special ability that lets you generate another skill. You have some very good dilemmas that are still good in their own right. The unscientific method specifically and the Hippocratic Oath are 2 dilemmas that are still used even today. Open diplomatic relations, although it is costly, it costs you 2 seed slots in combination with the treaty, but still many decks that want to play a dedicated treaty deck don't shy away from that. So there are cards that in many cases have stood the test of time. Space Door, if you look at it, and also Space Time Portal. And the fact that you have this playable fixed card side, but still the ridiculousness of the very first set that has some very over-the-top cards gives you some hilarious playing experiences. Not necessarily always good experiences in the sense that it's balanced, because it depends very much on whether one person picks a power card or whether the other person is set up to steal your missions. Often it comes down to stealing missions in that kind of format. But it's, in my experience, it's never not entertaining. If you don't go into it with the mindset that you play to win this, there's no guaranteed way to say I'm opening this and I'm winning this tournament. But it's, in my experience, it's always been great fun.
I kind of saw it as the ultimate warp pack. You know, it's sort of, the warp pack is trying to compensate for not being able to play from the beginning. And this is just great in that it gives you, as you say, this sort of plethora of cards that you can use to do something very fun with straight off the bat.
Really is what the warp pack should have been.
I just want to step back for a second there. You've kind of done something that we haven't talked about, which is what actually consists of a deck. And I know you showed us your deck. Can you bring that back up again? The deck with the missions, the Q's tent, and can you just explain like what a deck might look like and why they're different colors? So like which is which? So just like someone like me who doesn't really play would know what a deck consists of.
Different colors because I'm lazy, mostly. Technically, I'm not even sure that's legal. But what I try to separate is I have all my seed cards in red sleeves, the cards I need to set up the deck,
okay,
and the draw deck is usually in a different color. In this case, it's black. Now, of course, sometimes a seed card gets discarded and gets mixed in with the other cards.
Right.
So then you have to find some workaround, or you just say, okay, it's my fault for using different color sleeves. So if my opponent wants to do a random selection and let them go for the different color sleeve, be my guest and do so. But usually you just proxy a different card. You take your ship or something like that. And my missions also usually are a different color, but that's just really to help cleaning up the table afterwards. So to make it quicker. And then the seed cards, of course, have the doorways. Usually you have the Q's tent. That's where the additional sidecars are in. After the doorway cards, I put the mission cards, because that's the next step in the seed phase. You see doorways first, then missions. Then you have the rest of the seed cards, and that starts with the dilemmas that you seed first under your opponent's missions usually. And after that, you have all your facilities, interrupts, incidents, objectives that you seed. So it's usually in that order. And then you have the draw deck, which is then put on a separate part of the table. And sometimes there are also additional cards that are downloaded in the seed phase that are technically part of your draw deck, but for convenience sake, most people just take them out of the deck before the game starts, so they don't have to shuffle 5 times already before the game starts properly.
Yeah, I'm surprised you attributed the different colors to laziness, because when I'm looking at some of these board states, we talked about all the different side decks you can have. It just makes sense to me that if I were going into this for the first time, having them in different colors would be so incredibly helpful to know what's going on where at the table. I mean, keeping track of the board state.
Yeah, I think it's mostly to make sure that you're not giving yourself an unfair advantage by accidentally shuffling stuff somewhere where it shouldn't be.
Right.
And where it doesn't make a difference. For example, your tactics card from the Battle Bridge side deck, they can only ever go back to the Battle Bridge side deck. So those I usually have in a different color as well, so that I find them more easily, especially in longer tournaments, in championships where you play 6 rounds over the course of a day. And then you have games that go into overtime, and people are telling you the next round is starting in 5 minutes. Please clean up and get ready. I find it helpful to have it in different colors. So I just need to count the cards, but I don't have to look. Does this go into the seed deck? Because sometimes you have cards where you have multiple copies. You have one in the seed deck, one in the draw deck, or one in the Q's tent even. So that personally, it helps me to figure my stuff out more quickly.
Thanks. That was helpful to talk through. When you saw that, I immediately wanted to ask questions about it, just to learn about how that works. Other things from OTSD before we move on?
Got the Space Tour card, which has 2 sides. And so for me, it's absolutely essential that I had 2 copies of that, so I could display one each side in my 9 pocket pages. Also, the Husnock Outpost is an interesting one, because that's not an image that we saw in the show. At least we never saw a Husnock Outpost. So it looks like something out of Space 1999 or a different sci-fi show, but just a fun little note there. Also, the Open Diplomatic Relations image, I believe, is a composite. So again, these images that are being created for the cards, as opposed to just taken directly from a screen capture. It's still available, although it did see a pretty significant high price hike in the past couple of years, and they do sell fairly quickly. Its size and shape make it kind of awkward for packing, because at least for US mail, it sort of moves it into a more expensive shipping category, as opposed to being able to fit into a standard first-class package very easily. So that's also why when you buy it, you're often looking at double the shipping cost as opposed to just what would be a decent-sized stack of cards.
So why don't we take a break and pause here, and we'll pick up with the next portion of the fixed boutique promotional cards moving forward.